Okay, this is the second part in the series, and in this part we're going to be setting up the boilerplate code for auto-loading the contents of the package using the PSR-4 standard. As you can see, I've set up a test site on my homestead box, which is LWAP.site, and using the source code from the previous video, I'm basically going to clone this code into a specific folder within the website that I've set up. So going into the terminal and the folder where I set up the website, all I need to do is cd into the vendor folder, which serves as the folder for any composer dependencies, and we need to set up a new folder inside here. Now this will be the vendor name, so in the case of my project it'll just be my GitHub username. So if you just type that into the command line, you can do this either through the command line or within normal folders. So once this folder's created, we need to clone the repository, which will, when it downloads, it will appear as the package name. So the vendor name and the package name form two parts, and the folders are 2 levels down. Okay, so now that there is the repository in the correct place, all you need to do is generate a composer.json. So running composer.init will just give you a bunch of command line options. The only one you really need to fill in is where you're typing in the package name and the vendor name. Most of the other settings you can just press enter to skip, or just not fill in at all. And once this procedure is done, you should have a composer.json within the directory of your Git repository. So now that that file's generated, we can move on to the service provider. So Laravel comes with a command line tool to generate several files, and there is a specific command to generate a service provider. And what the service provider will do is it'll serve as an entry point for the website that you're developing within the package. So any PHP code that is getting run within the context of the package will have to be at some point triggered through the initial starting code of this package. So if you run PHP artisan make provider followed by the name of the provider, in this case it will be the package name followed by service provider, all camel cased. That will generate a file within the app providers folder of the website you're working in. So as you can see, the namespace is app providers, but we're actually going to be moving this into the package folder. So inside this actual folder we need a new folder which will be called source, which will basically be the actual used source code of the project. So the reasoning behind having a source folder is outside of the source folder there is folders for other purposes, and the actual source code of the site needs separating from other aspects such as tests and any readme files. So going back into this providers file, now that it's been moved, we can change the namespace to match what will be the namespace of the package. So again, this will just be the vendor name followed by package name, and that should be fine. So the next step after moving the service provider is going into the composer.json again and setting up the PSR-4 auto-loading. So to do this, all you need to do is add a new section to the JSON file, and this part will just be called class map. So all you need to do is set that in the JSON key. And just type in PSR-4 followed by So again, we'll just be using the vendor name and the package name, and that will serve as the target namespace for any folders starting from the source folder. So now that these changes have been done, we'll want to save all the changes and push them up to GitHub. This is so that later on in the tutorial, when we repopulate the composer dependencies, that we don't lose any changes to the package that we've made. So jumping into the compose.json that lives in the root of the website, we're basically going to add a new section in here which will allow us to load the package using composer commands. So we'll create a new repository section which will put in some information to make sure that the package is loaded through a specific command that uses the vendor name and package name. So for this you need to type in the type of compose package this is, and since it's version controlled, which is what the VCS stands for, version control system, that is part of the information you have to provide in the composer.json, and also the URL to the Git repository, which you can get from just going to the GitHub page. So with this information in place, we can now start to update the website. So now we need to reload the dependency by running composer require, followed by the vendor name and the package name, followed by dev master to make sure we're on the latest commit of the master branch, and then followed by prefer source, which is a very important point, because without this, when your package is reloaded into the vendor folder, there will no longer be a Git repository there. So this step definitely needs to be taken into consideration to make sure that you can continue committing code as the package is being developed. So now that this command has been run, the provider should be reachable. So any code that is provided inside the provider should now be able to run. The only last step that needs doing to incorporate it into the structure of Laravel is by adding it to the service providers array of the app config. So if you grab the namespace and then jump back into the app file and simply paste this in, followed by the class name of the service provider, and then once that file is saved, we should now be able to go onto the website and, yes, just double check that nothing is broken. So going back to the service provider, we can now put some test code within the boot method, and the boot method is run whenever a Laravel web page is launched. So I'm simply going to do an exit code here, which should disrupt the control flow of the web page. And now you can see it's actually outputting the code in my service provider. So that's it for this tutorial.